calls for the reinstatement of capital punishment from some quarters in Russia. That's in the aftermath of last week's terrorist attack at a popular Moscow music venue, where the death toll now stands at 137. Rescue workers continue to search for victims of the shootings. According to presidential spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Monday, the Kremlin is not involved in any talks to lift Russia's moratorium on the death penalty. He was asked about a debate that's currently going on among lawmakers on reinstating capital punishment, which has been effectively banned in Russia since 1996. The 4 men suspected of carrying out the attack have been captured. 2 have already confessed in court and are set to remain in custody until late May. They all face life in prison. Meanwhile, there were reports that at least 10 malls in Moscow received bomb threats on Monday. But according to a foreign journalist now living and working in Moscow, the people behind the attacks don't understand that Russians are not easily terrified. Fiorella Isabelle is a journalist and geopolitical analyst. She's an anchor and reporter with RT, the international news agency based in Moscow, and she also hosts a number of video blogs, including Fiorella in Moscow. We spoke with her via Skype from Moscow Monday. You're on the ground in Moscow. You're a journalist. Get to see all this information coming in. You know the place. And we were talking while I was there for the election. You were following the election that just concluded. What does all of this look like to you? You know, as not someone born there, but someone that lives there now.
Yeah, so I think that in order to understand what's happening right now in Russia, in Moscow in particular, it's easier to live there, and it's easier to also understand the geopolitical dynamics that are going on right now in the world. Nothing is in isolation. Nothing is in a vacuum. When we're talking about this Crocus City Hall massacre, this terrorist attack that killed over 140 people, the numbers have varied depending on the sources, from Russian state media to the Russian government, but it is around there because they have started, recuperating people from the rubble and also looking at people in the hospitals. What you're seeing is an attempt, I believe, by Ukraine and its backers, its foreign backers, to destabilize Russia internally, because they cannot attack Russia on the battlefield. We've seen the failure of Ukraine. We've seen Russia make advances, not just in Avdiivka, but in other militarily. And the Ukrainian army has lost so many men and so many of its own troops that it really isn't in a position to fight. And Zelensky is not in a position where he is trusted as a leader. He has replaced several of his own men. And you're seeing Ukraine in disarray, as well as Putin coming out of a very successful election, 86% plus of the vote, 87 actually percent of the vote and more, winning this election in flying colors in general. And in other new territories that voted for the president for the first time, you saw a higher number than that. These are numbers the United States can only dream of, because we don't have this type of fervor and excitement for elections in the U.S. So what else is left for Ukraine and its backers? Because let's be honest, Ukraine doesn't stand up, doesn't walk, and definitely doesn't run without the United States saying go. And since the Russian investigative committee has been able to trace these terrorists trying to escape via the Bryansk region into Ukraine, you can definitely have a tie to Ukraine right there, in spite of the fact that the United States said, oh, it is ISIS from the beginning. Why? Well, here's another thing, Don. These 4 assailants that have all now gone to court in Bismani, the Bismani court, these 4 assailants are Tajiki. They're from Tajikistan. Tajikistan is a country near Russia. A lot of people are coming in, doing blue-collar jobs, shoveling snow, cleaning the streets, that sort of thing. They are like the newer immigrants to Russia. There is already some sort of a little bit of uneasiness with some people, but it's been very small. It hasn't been like an overwhelming thing like we see in the United States. However, the Tajiki people are mostly Muslim people, and Tajikistan itself has a huge support for Ukraine in the country itself. And so, what better people to single out to cause this discord and this division in Russia than these people who got paid a small amount of money to kill all of these innocent people going to this concert in Crocus City Hall, which, by the way, is almost an hour by car with traffic from the center of Moscow. It is not in the center of Moscow, which is why I suspect there was less security. Crocus City Hall is very popular for a lot of artists, popular artists that have come through the years, but it was never huge on security. So whoever planned this knew that. And they knew that there would be a lot of people that day, and they knew that this would cause what it's caused, right? A lot of sadness, a lot of uneasiness in the Russian population. So what they didn't count on, though, is that you can't 9/11 the Russians. This is like an attempt to do that, to turn all of them against each other, against Muslims, and in an effort to really go after Russia internally. Because, again, Putin has been successful geopolitically so far. The sanctions have backfired, and militarily, Russia is doing well. And so I think, Don, the Russian people need to be able to see through this. And from what I've experienced, a lot of them have told me, we're going to continue living our life. We're going to go out. We've seen a lot of people go out and give flowers and support for the victims of the Crocus City Hall massacre. We've seen people just come out in droves to donate blood. We have seen all sorts of things here. And that, I think, is what Putin said in his statement recently after this attack happened. He said this is only going to unite the Russian people further. And the reason you can't 9/11 them is because they've gone through it all. Through the Great Patriotic War and the loss of millions and millions of lives, through the 2014 Maidan coup and the loss of tens of thousands of lives since. And then, of course, now with the special military operation, with being banned from traveling certain places, with all of these things, the Russian people are a very resilient people. And this is something I see in parts of Latin America that have been sequestered and hampered by U.S. hegemony, and parts of the Middle East, whether it's Iran or the Palestinian people. That is what I've seen, that sort of resilience that is only present if you have been forced to endure it. This is an attack on civilians in Moscow that have nothing to do with anything. Previously, we have seen civilians attack, civilians that are involved politically, like Daria Dugina, other bloggers that were part of the pro-Russia SMO operation. They would follow in war zones. They would report it with a pro-Russian stance. They were involved in that way. It still obviously wasn't fair that they were killed and targeted, but we've seen that targeting of Russian bloggers and war reporters and people like Daria Dugina. But this is a step further, because this is now civilians who are literally going to a concert, who have nothing to do with anything, and they're just there, and they happen to be there, and they're being attacked and killed and targeted in an effort to cause some sort of political chaos in the country, and in an effort to blame this ISIS, which, by the way, it's still all roads lead to Rome. Literally, whether you can say it's ISIS who funded and radicalized ISIS, it was the United States and its affiliates, which Russia and Syria are fighting, and Iraq are all fighting in Syria and Iraq in these regions. And then you have, if it's not ISIS, well, you have you have Langley, right? You have the intelligence apparatus that is behind Ukraine. The whole agenda of blaming ISIS, it puts people once again against Muslims, and you have this whole thing going on in Gaza where there's a massive genocide, where there is supposed to be a ceasefire now because of Ramadan, and which, the U.S. abstained, and Netanyahu is going crazy about this, and none of this is unrelated.
Fiorella Isabelle, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thank you.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.